The most feared mafia boss stormed the emergency room, only to find his captive wife delivering his heir. Dante Moretti hadn't seen sunlight in 96 hours. The most feared man in Chicago had spent 4 days tearing the city apart, brick by blood-stained brick. He'd burned down 3 warehouses on the south side, interrogated 2 informants until they wept and begged for death, and still, he had no answers about where his wife had gone. Rain hammered against the bulletproof windows of his Escalade as it screamed through red lights on Michigan Avenue. The city blurred past in streaks of neon and darkness. Dante's knuckles were white on his knees, his $10,000 Tom Ford suit rumpled and stained with substances he didn't want to identify. His dark hair, usually perfectly styled, hung in wet strands across his forehead. His gray eyes, the eyes that had made grown men confess to crimes they didn't commit, were hollow with exhaustion and something more terrifying: desperation. "Boss," Marco said from the driver's seat, his voice careful. Marco had known Dante since they were 10-year-old kids stealing cars in Little Italy. He'd never seen his friend like this. "We're 2 minutes out from St. Catherine. You sure about this intel?" Dante didn't answer. He was staring at his phone, at the photograph that had arrived 30 minutes ago from an untraceable number. The image was grainy, clearly taken from a security camera, but there was no mistaking the woman in the hospital gown. Dark hair cascading over her shoulders, delicate hand resting on a swollen belly that hadn't existed 4 days ago when she'd vanished from their penthouse. Francesca, his wife, pregnant. How could she be pregnant? The thought was a knife twisting in his gut. They'd been married 2 years, an arrangement between the Moretti and D'Angelo families to unite 2 of Chicago's most powerful crime dynasties. He'd tried to make it work, tried to earn her trust, her affection, but Francesca had kept him at arm's length, sleeping in separate bedrooms, speaking to him only when necessary. And now this. She was carrying his child, and she'd never told him. The Escalade screeched to a halt outside St. Catherine Medical Center, a massive complex of glass and steel rising into the storm-dark sky. Before Marco could shift into park, Dante was out of the vehicle, rain instantly soaking through his jacket. "Lock it down," Dante commanded, his voice cutting through the downpour like a blade. "Nobody in or out. Cut the cell signals. I want eyes on every exit." From the fleet of black SUVs that had followed them, 15 men emerged. They weren't dressed as soldiers. Dante was smarter than that. They wore suits, moved like bodyguards, but the bulges under their jackets told a different story. These were the Moretti family's most trusted enforcers, men who'd proven their loyalty in blood. Dante strode toward the emergency room entrance. The automatic doors slid open, releasing a burst of antiseptic-scented air and fluorescent light. Dante's eyes locked onto the triage desk where a young nurse in Winnie the Pooh scrubs sat frozen, her fingers hovering over her keyboard. "Francesca Moretti," Dante said, his voice low and deliberate. He didn't shout, he never needed to. "Tell me what room she's in, or I start making phone calls that will have this hospital's accreditation pulled before sunrise." The nurse's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't disclose patient information. HIPAA regulations." Dante placed both palms on the counter and leaned forward. His face remained perfectly calm, but his eyes promised consequences that had nothing to do with hospital regulations. "Let me be very clear," he said softly. "My wife has been missing for 4 days. I have spent the last 96 hours believing she was dead, that I'd failed to protect her. And now I discover she's here, in this building, possibly in danger. So you're going to tell me where she is, or I'm going to have my men search every single room on every single floor, and I guarantee you won't like how that process unfolds." "Dr. Chen," Dante said, straightening to his full 6'3" height, "I'm looking for my wife." "I know who you are, Mr. Moretti," Dr. Chen replied coolly. "Your reputation precedes you, and I know why you're here." She glanced at the armed men filling her ER waiting room. "But you need to understand something. This is a hospital. These people are sick and injured. You want to find your wife. Fine. But you leave the small army outside and you follow my rules. Are we clear? She arrived 3 hours ago, Dr. Chen said as the elevator doors closed, sealing them inside. Brought in by 2 men claiming to be private security. She was in active labor, already 6 centimeters dilated. She wouldn't tell us her real name, insisted we use Jane Doe on all documentation. Dante's hands clenched into fists. Where are the men who brought her? Still here, standing outside her room. Dr. Chen's eyes narrowed. They're not your men, are they? No. The doors opened to reveal a hallway decorated with cheerful murals of teddy bears and rainbows, and standing outside. Room 717 were 2 men in dark suits. Dante recognized the style immediately. The way they stood, the cut of their jackets, the cold professionalism in their posture. These weren't hospital security. These were Bratva, Russian mob. What happened next took less than 5 seconds. Marco and another enforcer moved with brutal efficiency, a suppressed shot to each Russian's kneecap, just enough to drop them without killing them or alerting the entire hospital. The men crumpled with muffled groans. 2 more Moretti soldiers dragged them into a nearby supply closet. His entire focus was on the door to room 717. Behind that door was Francesca. Behind that door were answers. Behind that door was his child being born. He reached for the handle, his hand trembling slightly, the first sign of vulnerability he'd shown in 4 days. Mr. Moretti, Dr. Chen said, her voice softening slightly. Whatever's happened between you and your wife, she's in the middle of delivering your baby. She's exhausted, terrified, and in more pain than you can imagine. So before you go in there demanding answers, remember that. Dante's jaw tightened. Then he pushed open the door. The room beyond was a chaos of medical equipment and urgent activity. Monitors beeped frantically, displaying numbers Dante didn't understand. The sharp smell of antiseptic mixed with something more primal, blood and sweat and the raw biology of childbirth. And there, in the center of it all, was Francesca. She was propped up on a delivery bed at a 45-degree angle, her dark hair, her olive skin pale and glistening. She wore a hospital gown that had ridden up to expose her hugely swollen belly. Her hands gripped the bed rails so tightly her knuckles were white. A nurse stood on one side, coaching her breathing. Another nurse was adjusting an IV line. But it was Francesca's face that stopped Dante's heart. She was in agony. Her features were twisted with a contraction, her mouth open in a silent scream, every muscle in her body rigid with effort. As he watched, the contraction peaked, and the scream found its voice, a raw primal sound that echoed off the walls. "That's it, Francesca," the nurse encouraged. "You're doing great. Just breathe through it. In through your nose, out through your mouth." Dante took a step into the room. The motion caught Francesca's attention. Her head turned, her pain-glazed eyes struggling to focus. And then she saw him. "No!" The word exploded from her with such force, such absolute terror, that it felt like a physical blow. Francesca tried to scramble backward on the bed, her hands scrabbling at the sheets, her eyes wild. "No, no, no, get him away from me!" She looked at the nurses desperately. "Please, don't let him near me. He'll kill it. He'll kill my baby." Dante stood frozen, his outstretched hand suspended in midair. He felt like he'd been shot, like a bullet had punched through his chest and torn out his heart. "Francesca," he managed, his voice cracking. "Amore mio, what are you? Wait, just don't call me that." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face mixing with sweat. "You liar! You sent those men! You ordered this! You wanted us dead!" "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, desperately trying to keep his voice calm. "Francesca, I've been looking for you for 4 days. I thought you were dead. I thought someone had taken you. I would never—" Dante's blood turned to ice. "I never said that. Francesca, I swear to you, I never—" "You said I was collateral damage." She was hyperventilating now, her chest heaving. "You said to do whatever they had to do. And then Marco came to me. He told me you'd hired a cleaner. that if I wanted to save our baby, I had to run. Then Marco's hand went for his gun. Dante was faster. He'd always been faster. His weapon cleared his shoulder holster in a blur of motion, and suddenly the two men stood in the delivery room with guns pointed at each other's heads. Why? Dante's voice was deadly quiet. 20 years, Marco. We grew up together. I trusted you with everything. Why would you do this? A bitter smile twisted Marco's face. Because you got soft, Dante. You fell in love with the D'Angelo princess, started talking about legitimate businesses and going straight. That's not how empires are built. So you tried to kill my wife? My child? I tried to save you from yourself. Marco's composure cracked, emotion bleeding into his voice. The old Dante would never have hesitated. He would have seen the marriage for what it was, a business arrangement. But you actually fell for her. You started making decisions with your heart instead of your head. What you deserve, Dante repeated slowly, is a bullet. Then do it, brother. Shoot me in front of your wife and your unborn child. Show them what you really are. Dante's finger tensed on the trigger, and then Francesca screamed. It wasn't a scream of pain or fear. It was something worse, a sound of pure biological panic. 6 months ago, Francesca continued, her words coming in gasps between contractions, I found out Marco was embezzling millions of dollars. I didn't know what to do. If I told you, there would be a war. People would die, so I went to the FBI. They offered me witness protection. They said if I helped them take down Constantine's network, they could give us a clean slate, you and me, a real life. The recording was fake, Dante said, the pieces finally falling into place. Marco used AI voice synthesis. He wanted you scared, wanted you to run so he could hand you over to Constantine. The baby twitched, then coughed, then opened its mouth and let out a thin, wavering cry that grew stronger with each second until it became a full-throated, indignant wail. It's a boy, Dr. Chen said, and there were tears in her eyes. You have a son, Mr. Moretti, a healthy, angry, absolutely perfect son. She placed the screaming infant on Francesca's chest. Francesca's trembling hands came up to cradle him, and she was laughing and crying at the same time. Hi, baby, she whispered. Hi, my sweet boy. Mommy's here. Daddy's here. You're safe. You're so safe. Dante stared at his son. The baby was impossibly small, skin still stained with blood and vernix, face scrunched up and red with crying, dark hair plastered to his tiny skull, perfect miniature fingers curled into fists. His son. He reached out with one shaking hand and touched the baby's cheek with his fingertip. The skin was so soft it barely felt real. If you loved watching Dante transform from a feared mafia boss into a devoted father willing to sacrifice everything for his family, then smash that like button right now. Share this story with someone who believes love can change even the darkest hearts. Subscribe to Real Drama TV for more intense stories of mafia romance, redemption arcs, and families fighting against impossible odds. And comment below, do you think Dante/Dominic can really leave his past behind? Should Marco get a redemption story of his own? What would you do if you had to choose between power and family? Drop your thoughts below. We read every single comment. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing a warrior can do is choose peace. See you in the next story.